Hey, Greg here. In this video, I'll talk about my most exciting venture so far, the Dalton Highway. The Dalton Highway is a road in Alaska beginning just north of Fairbanks, and it goes north. Really far north. The farthest north you can go in a car in North America. At the end of it is a place called Prudhoe Bay, and situated there is Dead Horse Camp, which marks the beginning of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. If it wasn't for the oil fields in Prudhoe Bay, there would be no Dalton Highway. The road follows the Trans-Alaska Pipeline for its entire length, and along it are the various pump stations. So the road is used mostly by workers and also truckers heading to and from Dead Horse Camp. When I was reading about the Dalton Highway, it seemed that everyone that's driven it has a very strong opinion about it, and these opinions could generally be broken down into two schools of thought. The first is that it's easy, it's a fun drive, it's a cinch, no problem, just be prepared. And the second is essentially the total opposite of that. Now, after having driven it, I'd say my opinion is somewhat in between. I mean, there's no denying statistics. The Dalton is one of the most dangerous roads in the world. It takes a lot of lives. However, if you're prepared, you will probably be fine. Probably. There's always the possibility that you will get 4 flat tires, or a rock will jump up and sever a brake line, or you will hit a slippery patch and drive off a cliff, or a storm will hit and will ruin your visibility. So yes, it's dangerous, but it's not by any means impossible. The question I was asking myself ever since I left Calgary was, should I drive the Dalton? A few days after I finished the drive, I met someone who was in the exact same situation as me. They were on their way to Fairbanks, deciding if they were going to drive the Dalton or not, and they were asking for my advice. I came up with 3 criteria that I thought they should meet if they wanted to drive the highway. Number 1, are you a good driver? And by this, I don't mean a safe driver that stays 4 car lengths behind the next car and never forgets to signal for every turn they make. I mean, are you a good driver? Can you make maneuvers? Do you trust your instincts? Have you driven in harsh conditions before? Number 2, can you change a flat tire? Because you will probably have to at some point. Number 3, do you enjoy driving? This is the most important one, because if you don't actually like driving, then you're gonna have a terrible time on this highway. It's tough, it's challenging, you have to be intently focused on the road for 4 days straight. Lots of people I've met on the road camping are big hikers or bikers or hunters or fishers. The reason I'm living in a car and doing what I'm doing is because I love to drive. It's one of my passions. The days where I'm on the road for 10 hours, those are my favorite days. So for me, the Dalton Highway was the ultimate adventure. It was fun, it was challenging, and it was beautiful. Anyway, the drive took 4 days, 2 days each way. Within the first 5 minutes, I saw someone pulled over with a flat tire. I gave them a hand changing it, and then I was on my way. The first day I spent mostly in forest and mountains, although there is a short stint of grassland before you reach the Arctic Circle. The first day I made it to Coldfoot Camp, which is approximately the halfway point. It's also the last chance you have to fuel up before the 240-mile stretch to Dead Horse Camp, although it will cost you a pretty penny. I camped in Coldfoot that night and was on the road early the next morning. Day 2 was breathtaking. Once you hit the end of the mountains, the tundra opens up, and it was surreal. I've never seen such an open space before. Lots of caribou, lots of moose, and lots of open space. This area is called the North Slope because it slopes down towards sea level. Eventually I reached Dead Horse Camp. It's cold and harsh. It's exactly what you picture when you think of the word Arctic. I spent the night camping in the cold, and at 8:30 the next morning, I was on a bus tour to go to the Arctic Ocean. So now I can say I've swam in 4 out of 5 oceans. Coldest water I've ever been in. Later that morning, I gassed up and broke my personal record for the most I've ever paid for a tank of gas. Then I began the journey back. A few hours in, I stopped and met this guy watching his friend stalk a caribou on the side of the road. I decided to stay and watch, and 10 minutes later, he got the kill. Apparently, they had been following the same caribou for 12 hours, so I showed up just in time. I was going to spend the night camping with them, but after they gutted it and hung the meat, they got a call from another hunting friend who needed some help northward. I didn't have quite enough fuel to join them, so they cut me a piece of meat and I was on my way. A few hours later, I finally popped a tire, so I had to pull over and change it. Thank God this is my only flat. If I had one more pop tire, I would have been totally screwed. I camped at the Arctic Circle that night and had a caribou steak for dinner. Day 4 was only about another 4-hour drive back to Fairbanks. Once I got back, I was completely exhausted. It was the most intense 4 days of driving I've ever had in my entire life. Completely worthwhile. It was such a fun drive. It was the most scenic, beautiful road I've ever been on in my entire life. It was unbelievable. The most fun I've had on this journey so far. I didn't want to spend any more time in Fairbanks, so that night I left on the highway towards Anchorage. I spent one day in Denali Park and decided, since I was only spending one day there, that I would do the longest trail hike they had, so I ended up hiking 30 kilometers the next day. I also caught a glimpse of North America's tallest mountain, Mount Denali, also known as Mount McKinley. I prefer Denali because every time someone says McKinley, it reminds me of Wet Hot American Summer.
Hey! McKinley and Ben! This is for you.
It's a chaise lounge. We didn't know if maybe you guys already had one. We have the receipt if you do.
That night I drove to Anchorage and get this. It actually got dark. Like, really dark. For the first time since I entered Alaska, it actually felt like nighttime. So this week ends in Anchorage. Quite the journey so far. Thanks again for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. I will see you same time, different place next week.